Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into the fascinating world and really the thoughts of the artist, Bob Camblin.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've got this great mix of materials you shared, his own quotes, bits from books, reviews, even a video transcript.
Exactly. And the goal really is to get a solid handle on Camblin's unique perspective, his artistic philosophy, without getting totally bogged down.
Right, to kind of sift through it all and pull out the core threads, see what makes him tick.
So let's start with who Bob Camblin was. Born 1928 in Oklahoma, described as this iconoclastic, sort of enigmatic artist.
Highly sought after, apparently, even though he himself was pretty elusive.
Yeah. He studied at the Kansas City Art Institute, got a Fulbright to Italy, taught at universities for a bit.
But then made that big change in 76.
Right, decided to become a nomadic artist, just travel and create.
And you wonder how that background, the formal training, then the, let's say, structured teaching, and then going nomadic, how all that fed into his later ideas.
That tension, yeah, between structure and, total freedom, it seems to pop up.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's dive into some of these quotes. He had this interesting take on time and change first. Fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years, perhaps.
There's a definite wryness there. Bit dark, maybe.
And then, contrasting that, this really stark observation, look, 3 cottonwood trees, dense cluster of new branches, now with them gone. Look.
Wow, yeah. That just hits you. The suddenness of loss, the observation of change right there. It shows that keen eye he had.
He was definitely paying attention.
And the first quote, that 10 years perhaps,
Hmm?
it hints at that idea of impermanence, something you see in Eastern philosophy too.
Absolutely. He also touched on memory and aging with this line. It's quite poignant. As they approached, the memory of songs and music stopped at the moment the texture of its decay became visible to them.
Ugh.
Sad how we all aged at that moment in time. Salt Air, summer 1967.
That's beautiful in a sad way. It links memory, that feeling of decay when a memory fades, and this shared sense of time passing. And grounding it in Salt Air, summer 1967, makes it so specific, yet universal.
Yeah, that feeling when something cherished starts to fray a bit.
And you feel yourself fraying along with it.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. His views on art, philosophy, science, magic, they're really intertwined for him. He said, look into the atom, you get what you need. Look into magic, and you get what you need. Philosophy and art are in both.
So he's not seeing them as separate boxes. He's finding the core stuff, the need in all these different ways of looking.
Exactly. And then there's this amazing quote. I will stick with common sense and try for the perfectly average view of the universe, which sounds, well, average.
But wait, there's more to it, right?
Yeah, it goes on. I think that will let me enjoy miracles on both sides of science and magic and the nuances of the smear between the whiteness and the blackness.
Okay, so perfectly average isn't about being mundane. It's about finding a balance point, a perspective that can hold both the rational and the magical.
And hope that I can be around when the two meet in the near future and we have an intensely bright gray.
Wow. So he's looking for this synthesis, this bright gray, where science and magic aren't opposites anymore. That's a pretty profound idea, actually. Not average at all.
Not average at all. It's about embracing the whole spectrum, the smear between black and white.
That ambiguity.
And he even talks about a sixth sense. He defines it as the sixth sense is to be without a doubt senza dubio, no doubt.
So deep conviction, pure intuition. He's calling that a sense, a way of perceiving reality directly.
Beyond just logic.
Yeah, a kind of innate knowing.
There's also this push and pull in his quotes between being grounded and wanting to transcend, like, bright day and I soar, how cruel that my soul is attached to this earth and yet.
That classic feeling. The spirit wants to fly, but the body's here.
But then he also says, find something in nature that completes you and then surrender.
Okay, so maybe nature is the bridge, the place where you find that connection, that sense of completion, and can kind of let go of the struggle, accept the earthly part.
Seems like it. Finding peace in that connection.
Makes sense.
He also really hammers home the idea of being present, of action over thinking sometimes. When you think, don't act. When you act, don't think.
That's very direct, like be fully in the doing or fully in the thinking, but don't mix them muddily.
Yeah. And then simply step off the train of thought.
Which sounds a lot like meditation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Quieting the mental chatter. We see later he mentions Zazen.
Right, that aimless mind focusing itself. It connects directly. Get out of your head, experience things. And his ideas on art's purpose, they seem to evolve. He said art is not just images. Art for art's sake has become art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or art for survival's sake.
So art moving beyond just aesthetics, becoming more fundamental to, well, life itself. Personal expression, maybe coping, survival even.
The shift in intention. Yeah.
Reflecting broader changes in art during his time, probably.
We also get these evocative little fragments like, in the balance, patience and yet, freedom again, and yet, in silence, the reality can be maintained.
Patience and freedom, held together in silence. Like silence is where you can hold those opposing forces.
And find some kind of reality. And then this zinger, when understood, all truth is funny.
Huh. Okay, so maybe seeing the big picture, the ultimate truth, involves a sense of cosmic humor, the absurdity of it all.
Could be, it suggests a certain lightness.
Okay, let's try and weave these quotes into the bigger picture from the other materials. His fascination with paradox.
Yeah, like bending is not bowing, or
Oh.
to find the power that is no power, to do the work that is not work.
Right. And then a book review calls his drawings paradoxes made visible. That fits perfectly, doesn't it?
It really does. He wasn't just drawing things, he was drawing contradictions, making you think differently.
Challenging assumptions.
And his focus on direct experience. One must learn not to look, but to see.
That connects straight to the Zen ideas mentioned in the book, Forewords and Reviews, right? That emphasis on just seeing, getting beyond the surface layer.
Exactly. Moving past just glancing into a deeper, maybe more intuitive way of understanding.
Which is maybe what he wanted his art to do,
Mhm.
to encourage that kind of deep seeing in the viewer.
Seems likely. For you, our listener who shared these sources, maybe exploring that idea of truly seeing in your own creative work could be, fruitful.
And think about his collaborations, signing things anonymous.
Especially when he also said, we may be moving to a participatory type of art.
It suggests he was thinking about art beyond the single genius creator,
Yeah.
maybe blurring the lines between artist and audience, de-emphasizing the ego.
Yeah, letting go of the I, which connects to his views on belief versus knowing.
Ah, right. Believing and knowing are different. Mystics know something else. Logic won't make the trip. One must look for the balance of intuition and logic.
And this seems to feed into the description of his art, speaking directly to the viewer's soul, without the need for interpretation or explanation.
He's aiming for that direct hit, that intuitive knowing he talks about, bypassing the analytical mind. It's about feeling it, not just thinking about it.
A visceral connection.
Exactly.
And this idea of art being and not being, how does that fit?
Well, the foreword to that Zen and the Art of Enlightenment book talks about the fluid nature of experience, constant change. Maybe Camblin saw art like that too. Not fixed, but something in flux, constantly being reinterpreted, constantly shifting.
Like reality itself.
Sort of mirroring that impermanence we talked about earlier.
I also found his resistance to traditional learning really telling. Resist learning, learn to fail, learn to relax, learn to feel, learn how to really think.
Yeah. It's not about cramming facts. It's about experience, feeling, self-reflection, embracing failure even.
And he follows it with, I didn't learn anything new, but I know a lot more now.
Which is brilliant. It captures that difference between accumulating information and gaining actual understanding or wisdom.
And a book review mentioned his art challenging linear thought, encouraging self-inquiry. It all lines up.
It really does. It paints a picture of someone valuing intuition, presence, direct experience over received wisdom or rigid thinking.
And what about the mirrors? Everyone is a mirror, and that is magic. Laugh, laugh, laugh.
Paired with the idea of art being a mirror reflecting your own mind. It suggests everything reflects us back to ourselves, doesn't it? Our interactions, the art we see.
Yeah.
It's all a chance for self-discovery.
With a dose of laughter thrown in. Don't take it too seriously.
Right. And considering he chose that nomadic life.
His statement, the artist today is the only free agent. He is not committed except so much as he desires it. Makes perfect sense.
He lived that freedom, didn't he? Opting out of the usual structures.
And that quote about communication, the symbolists were right that in explaining something it was killed. Communications, how wonderful and how sad.
Ah, the limits of words. Explaining kills the magic. Which probably explains why his drawings were often described as cryptic, with hidden meanings. He didn't want to spell it all out.
Leave space for the mystery.
Exactly.
Let's touch on some of those biographical details that stood out. His childhood in Ponca City, Oklahoma during the oil boom.
Yeah, and the influence of the Marlin Estate, the Pioneer Women statue, and him adding his own Viva Camblin references.
Yeah.
That's quite a mix of influences.
Well, it gives you a sense of place, And maybe a bit of his defiant humor early on.
Definitely. And I loved that story about him reading fiction during art class.
So telling, right? Just absorbing inspiration from wherever, not just the assigned texts.
Yeah.
Unconventional.
Very. And his time in Italy on the Fulbright, seeing the Uffizi masters, but also the Capuchin catacombs.
Wow, yeah, that contrast between high art and, well, stark mortality, that must have left a mark.
You'd think so. Rich imagery there.
And then the mention of his St. Bambola series, but also his desire to turn off my myth-making machine.
Shows that self-awareness again. He's conscious of his own tendencies, his own myth-making, and wants to push against it sometimes. Always evolving.
Always questioning. Like with his collaborations, B&E Productions with Earl Staley and Joe Tate, doing things like a tattoo show, a camping show.
It sounds really experimental, pushing the boundaries of what art could be, where it could happen. Very collaborative, too.
And his work changing over time, mentioning mouches volantes, those eye floaters.
Really? Using those as inspiration.
Apparently. And later series like Big Owl, it shows he wasn't static, he kept exploring.
Constantly looking for new ways to see and new things to depict.
We also got that lovely personal insight from Earl Staley, calling Camblin a gregarious storyteller and saying he learned how to draw and paint from Bob.
It's nice to hear that side of him, the generous teacher and engaging personality behind the enigmatic artist image.
Definitely. And then there's that wild anecdote. The patron who paid with $100 bills sealed inside a blown glass tube.
What? That's bizarre. What does that even mean?
Who knows? But it certainly shows a complicated, maybe even performative relationship with the whole idea of selling art, doesn't it?
For sure. A statement piece in itself, almost.
And the description of his studio, a treasure tableau of the curious and outrageous, like entering a wizard's den.
You can just picture it, can't you? Filled with oddities and inspiration, a reflection of his mind.
Totally. And finally, adopting the Mr. Peanut persona at one point and then signing as anonymous.
It loops back to that submerging of the ego, letting go of the named identity.
Okay, let's bring in that YouTube video, The Silk of Stillness, that central image. Spider web lizard.
Yeah, it's very focused, very quiet. Themes of stillness, wonder, interconnectedness. It really resonates with his other ideas.
And the description of the spider weaving a sutra, like a thread of wisdom, in erasing the maze of illusion.
That's such a poetic way to put it, tying the natural act to these deeper, almost spiritual concepts. Dismantling illusion through creation. It feels very Camblin.
It really does, and it highlights that core idea. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yes. That feels like the key to unlocking Camblin, doesn't it? Shift your perspective, challenge your assumptions, and reality itself transforms. That's what his art seems to ask us to do.
And that moment of shared silence between the spider and the lizard.
It's powerful. A connection beyond the usual roles found in that stillness. Just being.
Which leads to the final thought in the video. All things arising, dwelling, and dissolving in this infinite consciousness.
Bringing it full circle back to those big themes of cycles, change, impermanence that run through his work, in quotes. It connects the tiny spiderweb drama to the whole cosmos.
So wrapping up this deep dive, Bob Camblin, he really comes across as this artist wrestling with paradox, obsessed with time's fleeting nature, championing direct experience.
And seeing connections everywhere, science, magic, art, nature. His work seems designed to make us stop, look closer, maybe question things.
Yeah, it invites contemplation, challenges how we see things, pushes for that shift in perspective, very much in line with those Zen ideas, but with his own unique, sometimes playful, sometimes profound spin.
It's really striking how all these different pieces, the quotes, the bio, the reviews, the video, they all kind of echo each other and build this cohesive picture of a really singular way of looking at the world.
Absolutely. So, a final thought for our listeners to chew on. Camblin emphasized seeing over just looking and believed changing how you look changes what you see. What if you applied that? Think about some illusion or maybe just a stuck pattern in your own life. What might happen if you looked at it differently with that beginner's mind he seemed to value?
Free from the usual assumptions.
Exactly. Could you find one of those unexpected miracles Camblin talked about, hiding in that gray area between what you expect and what's actually possible? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.